My name is Madeline. I am 33 years old and a senior cybersecurity consultant. My husband Noah and I have built a wonderful, quiet life together. But peace is something my family has never understood. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who underestimated your intelligence and tried to manipulate your boundaries. The leather chair in Richard's office squeaked against the heavy silence of the room. Richard was a man who wore suits that were slightly too tight and smiled with the kind of unearned confidence only a mediocre lawyer possesses. He folded his hands atop his pristine mahogany desk and leaned forward, adopting a tone of exaggerated patience. He spoke to me as if I were a confused child, and not a woman who designed digital defense systems for federal contractors. Madeline, your mother is extending an incredible olive branch here, Richard said, his voice dripping with condescension. After 3 years of you abandoning your familial duties, Brenda is willing to let bygones be bygones. She is being extraordinarily gracious by not pursuing legal action against you for elder neglect. All you need to do is sign page 4, and she will drop the matter entirely. I stared at the heavy brass pen he pushed toward me across the polished wood. Elder neglect. The phrase was so absurd it barely registered. My mother Brenda was 60 years old, perfectly healthy, and spent her weekends playing tennis at the country club. 3 years ago, I walked away from her and my older brother Trent after they systematically tried to destroy my life. Brenda had physically blocked me from attending my own master's graduation ceremony because Trent was feeling depressed about his latest failed startup. She claimed my celebration would be insensitive to his pain. When I finally drew a line, she told the entire extended family I was mentally unstable and needed psychiatric isolation. She even had the audacity to call my husband Noah a pathetic downgrade, claiming a landscape architect was nothing more than a glorified lawnmower. She had no idea that Noah actually owned a multi-million-dollar ecological design firm. I had not spoken a word to her since. Now this man was trying to threaten me with an elder neglect lawsuit to force a signature. I picked up the document, but I did not flip to page 4 as he instructed. I started at page 1. The legal jargon was dense, but I read contracts for a living. The document was a formal request to restructure the family trust fund my grandfather had established in 1995. My grandfather was a brilliant man who built his wealth carefully, and he always knew how manipulative my mother could be. You are taking a very long time to read a simple release form, Madeline Richards sighed, checking his expensive watch. I have other clients waiting. Just sign the bottom line so we can put this ugly family rift behind us. Trent is really counting on this reconciliation. The mention of Trent told me everything I needed to know. I kept reading. Page 3 outlined the restructuring. They wanted to liquidate a massive portion of the trust and use it as collateral for a commercial loan. Trent was in trouble again, and Brenda was trying to steal my share of the inheritance to bail out her golden boy. The sheer audacity of the document washed over me. They actually thought they could bully me into signing away my financial future with an empty threat. The corners of my mouth twitched. A low chuckle escaped my throat. I tried to suppress it, but the image of Brenda storming into this office and spinning a web of lies about my mental state to this gullible lawyer was too much. The chuckle grew into a full laugh. I leaned back in the heavy leather chair, letting the thick legal document fall onto my lap. I laughed until tears pricked the corners of my eyes. The sound echoed loudly in the sterile, quiet office. Richard stiffened. His smug smile vanished and was replaced by a look of deep concern and growing irritation. Madeline, this is a serious legal proceeding. I fail to see what is so amusing. Are you unwell? Do we need to call someone for you? I wiped a tear from my cheek and took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. No, Richard. I am perfectly fine. I am just amazed at how completely you have been played by your own clients. He frowned, and his face flushed a dull red. I assure you, My clients have been entirely transparent with me regarding your history of erratic behavior. Now, are you going to sign the document, or do I need to file the elder neglect petition tomorrow morning? I leaned forward, mirroring his earlier posture, but with none of the false warmth. I tapped the thick paper with my index finger. You did not read the original charter for this trust fund, did you? You just drafted this amendment based on whatever Brenda told you to write. Richard scoffed, his face turning a deeper shade of crimson. I am a partner at this firm, Madeline. I do not need a client's daughter telling me how to read boilerplate trust documents. The restructuring is perfectly legal, assuming you sign the consent form. And since your mother is offering to waive the elder neglect lawsuit, in exchange, this is a highly beneficial arrangement for you. I leaned back and crossed my arms. My grandfather Theodore was a paranoid man, Richard. He built his fortune in commercial real estate during the late 80s, and he saw firsthand how money could tear families apart. He knew his daughter Brenda was greedy. He knew she would eventually try to siphon the principal instead of living off the interest. So when he established the irrevocable trust in 1995, he did not use boilerplate language. He hired a boutique firm in Manhattan to draft a very specific poison pill clause. Richard blinked, his arrogant posture faltering for a fraction of a second. Poison pill clauses are typically for corporate takeovers, not family trusts. You are using terms you do not understand. Section 4. Paragraph 7. I recited, keeping my gaze locked on his sweating forehead. The in terrorem provision. It states clearly that any beneficiary who initiates legal proceedings or formally demands a restructuring of the trust assets without the prior written unanimous consent of all other beneficiaries shall immediately forfeit their entire interest in the trust. Their share is automatically redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries. The silence in the room became incredibly heavy. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner suddenly sounded like a countdown. Richard swallowed hard. His eyes darted down to the document on his desk. That only applies if a lawsuit is filed to contest the will. This is just a preliminary restructuring proposal. I shook my head slowly. No, Richard. The language my grandfather insisted upon was notoriously broad. It specifically includes formal legal demands drafted by counsel to alter the distribution schedules. You did not just ask me to dinner to discuss a loan. You drafted a legally binding demand letter. You put it on your firm's official letterhead. You served it to me in your office, and you tied it to an extortion attempt regarding a baseless elder neglect lawsuit. I watched the exact moment the realization hit him. The blood drained completely from his face, leaving his skin the color of old parchment. He quickly grabbed the thick file folder he had kept pushed to the side of his desk and began frantically flipping through the pages. He was looking for the original 1995 charter, the document he should have read before taking Brenda on as a client. You see, Richard, my mother did not give you the full charter, did she? I asked, my voice smooth and calm. She probably gave you the summary pages and told you the rest was standard. She wanted to use your fancy letterhead to bully me into signing away my security. But Brenda is not very smart. She did not realize that by having you draft this specific document and presenting it to me, she triggered the poison pill. Richard's hands began to shake slightly as he finally found the page. His eyes scanned the dense paragraphs, reading the exact words I had just quoted from memory. I could practically see the liability calculations running through his mind. He had just facilitated the legal disinheritance of his own clients. By presenting this document to me today without my prior consent, Brenda and Trent have violated the core condition of the trust, I explained, standing up from my chair. They just legally forfeited their entire $2 million share. And because I am the only remaining beneficiary, their share now defaults entirely to me. This cannot be right, Richard muttered, his voice barely a whisper. He frantically flipped back and forth between the original charter and the new amendment he had drafted. If this is true, your mother will sue my firm for malpractice. She told me this was a simple family agreement. She said you were just being difficult and needed a firm push. Well, Richard, it looks like you pushed her right off a financial cliff, I replied, picking up my purse. My grandfather wanted to ensure that whoever tried to steal from the family would be left with absolutely nothing. He was protecting me from the exact thing you two tried to do today. Richard looked up at me, his previous smugness completely erased. He looked like a man who had just stepped on a landmine and heard the click. He reached for his desk phone, his fingers trembling. I have to call Brenda. I have to tell her to withdraw the demand immediately. It is too late for that, I said, walking toward the door. You already served it. The document is dated signed by you as her legal representative and physically handed to me. The legal trigger has been pulled. The trust administrators will receive my sworn affidavit regarding this interaction by the end of the business day. But please do call her. I am sure she will be thrilled to hear how her brilliant extortion plan turned out. And honestly, Richard, you might want to call your malpractice insurance provider right after. Richard did not even wait for me to reach the door. His trembling hand slammed down on the speakerphone button on his desk console. He punched in my mother's number with frantic force. The digital ringing echoed off the wood-paneled walls of his office. 1 ring, 2 rings. I paused with my hand hovering over the brass doorknob, turning back just enough to watch the panic consume him. On the 3rd ring, the line clicked open. Richard, tell me you have good news, Brenda sang through the speaker. Her voice was dripping with that artificial sweetness she always used when she thought she was winning. Tell me that ungrateful child finally stopped her temper tantrum and signed the paper. Trent is waiting to hear from the bank. Brenda, we have a massive problem, Richard stammered, his voice cracking an octave higher than before. The trust charter. You did not give me the full trust charter when you hired me. Why did you not tell me about the in terrorem clause? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Then the artificial sweetness vanished completely, replaced by the harsh, abrasive tone I had grown up fearing. What on earth are you talking about, Richard? I gave you everything you needed. Do not tell me you let Madeline confuse you. I warned you she was mentally unstable. She is probably making things up to stall. She has always been a pathological liar. She is not making anything up. Brenda, Richard yelled, wiping a bead of sweat from his upper lip. She recited it from memory. By having me draft and serve a formal demand to restructure the trust, you triggered a poison pill provision. You and Trent just forfeited your entire $2 million share. It defaults to her. You legally disinherited yourselves. A heavy dead silence hung over the speakerphone for exactly 3 seconds. Then the explosion happened. It was a sound of pure, unhinged rage. You vicious little viper! Brenda screamed, her voice distorting through the small speaker. I know you are sitting right there, Madeline. I know you are listening. You planned this. You deliberately set a trap to destroy your own brother. After everything I sacrificed to raise you, this is how you repay me. You are trying to leave us with nothing. I stepped away from the door and walked slowly back toward the desk. I leaned down so my voice would carry perfectly into the microphone. I did not set a trap, Brenda. I simply allowed you to walk into the one grandfather built for you. He knew you would try to steal from me eventually. I am just surprised it took you 3 years to get this desperate. You listen to me right now. Brenda shrieked, the sound so loud, Richard actually winced and pulled back from the console. You are going to tell this incompetent idiot of a lawyer to tear up that document. You are going to sign a waiver reinstating our shares. If you do not fix this right now, I swear to God I will ruin you. I picked up my purse and slipped the strap over my shoulder. You have no leverage left, Brenda. You have nothing I want and nothing I fear. Oh, I have plenty of leverage, Brenda snarled. If you do not fix this, I will destroy that pathetic loser you married. I will call every single client Noah has. I will tell them he is a fraud and a con artist. I will post it all over the internet. He is nothing but a glorified lawnmower who manipulated my sick daughter into marriage just to get his hands on our family money. I will make sure he never cuts another blade of grass in this state. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same icy detachment I used when neutralizing a cyber threat at work. Brenda was flailing wildly trying to hit a nerve. She still thought Noah was just some guy pushing a mower around suburban yards. She had never bothered to learn that his ecological design firm had just won a massive municipal contract to redesign the downtown waterfront. Please do, Brenda. I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Please call the City Planning Commission and tell them the landscape architect they just awarded a $5 million contract to is a glorified lawnmower. I am sure the mayor will find your input fascinating. But remember, everything you say in print or public is defamation. And unlike you, Noah actually has the capital to sue you into the ground. Richard was hyperventilating now. Brenda stopped talking, he pleaded, rubbing his temples. Stop threatening her. You are making the liability worse with every word you say. I have to hang up and review the files to see if there is any loophole. Do not you dare hang up on me, Richard, Brenda yelled. Madeline, you worthless piece of garbage, you will pay for this. I will make sure you regret the day you were born. I did not stay to hear the rest of the insult. I turned my back on the desk and walked out of the office, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind me. The thick wood completely muffled my mother's screaming. I stood in the quiet, carpeted hallway, taking a deep breath of the air-conditioned air. I had won the first battle without even breaking a sweat. As I walked toward the elevator, I knew Brenda would not stop here. She would escalate. She always did. I reached the end of the carpeted corridor and pressed my hand against the cold metal of the elevator button. Just as my skin made contact, my smartwatch vibrated violently against my wrist. It was not a standard text message notification or a calendar reminder. It was a rapid triple pulse. The specific haptic pattern I had custom coded for critical security breaches at my cybersecurity firm. I lifted my wrist and tapped the screen. A bright red banner illuminated the small display. High priority alert from the proprietary identity monitoring system my team had built for federal clients. I had integrated my own credentials into the beta testing phase 2 years ago, just to monitor my personal data. I never actually expected the system to catch a massive breach on my own profile. I stepped into the empty elevator and watched the doors slide shut before reading the full alert. My heart, which had been completely calm during the confrontation with Richard, suddenly skipped a beat. Someone had just used my social security number. They did not just run a soft inquiry or apply for a minor store credit card. The alert detailed a formal application for a $250,000 commercial line of credit. The application was currently pending approval at a regional bank headquartered in Miami, Florida. I live in Connecticut, and I have not set foot in Florida since a college spring break over a decade ago. I stared at the glowing numbers on my watch as the elevator descended to the parking garage. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The legal document upstairs was a distraction, or maybe it was Plan A and this was their immediate backup plan. Trent was drowning in debt from his fraudulent tech startup. Brenda was desperate to save him. They knew the trust fund restructuring would take weeks even if I had signed the paper. They needed liquid cash right now, so they decided to bypass the legal route entirely and commit a federal crime. Identity theft, wire fraud. They were actively trying to steal $250,000 using my name and my flawless credit score. If Trent defaulted on that commercial loan, which he absolutely would, the bank would come after me. My assets, my home, my clearance level at work, everything would be frozen and investigated. They were willing to completely destroy my life, my career, and my freedom just to keep Trent's pathetic facade intact for a few more months. Brenda would rather see her daughter in a federal courtroom than see her golden child face the consequences of his own financial incompetence. The elevator dinged and the doors opened to the dimly lit parking garage. I walked briskly to my car, my mind racing through the protocols I needed to execute. Normal people would panic. Normal people would immediately dial 911 or call their bank crying. But I am not normal people. I am a senior cybersecurity consultant who specializes in tracking digital footprints and dismantling financial cybercrimes. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, but I did not start the engine. Instead, I pulled my secure laptop from my briefcase and rested it on the steering wheel. I tethered it to my phone's encrypted hotspot. I needed to verify the source of the application before I made my next move. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I bypassed the standard consumer credit bureaus and logged directly into my firm's backdoor monitoring portal. I pulled up the raw data packet from the loan application. Whoever filled it out was incredibly sloppy. They used my correct social security number and my correct date of birth, but they listed a burner phone number and an email address routed through a cheap commercial virtual private network. They probably thought the virtual private network would mask their physical location. But cheap commercial systems leak data like a sieve if you know exactly where to look. I ran a trace on the packet's origin Internet Protocol address, bypassing the proxy servers layer by layer. The progress bar on my screen inched forward 10%, 50%, 90%. The screen flashed green and dropped a pin on a digital map. The address did not belong to a server in Miami. It resolved to a residential internet service provider in a wealthy suburb of Boston. It was Trent's exact home address. I sat in the quiet garage staring at the undeniable proof of his felony. They really thought I was just a naive girl they could walk all over. They had no idea they had just handed a loaded gun to a digital sniper. I closed the laptop. The game had completely changed. This was no longer just a family dispute over a trust fund. This was wire fraud. And I was going to let them dig their graves a little deeper before I pushed them in. I sat in the dim light of the parking garage, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. My laptop was closed on the passenger seat, but the glowing green pin on the digital map was permanently burned into my mind. Trent's address. My own brother was actively trying to saddle me with $250,000 in fraudulent debt. The realization settled in my chest like a block of ice. The sheer depravity of it was staggering. For years they had chipped away at my self-esteem. Brenda had always shielded Trent from the consequences of his actions. When he wrecked his first car, she blamed the sun glaring in his eyes. When his first business went under, she blamed the economy. Now he was committing a federal offense, and she was right there holding the shovel. They thought I was the same quiet girl who used to hide in her bedroom. They thought I would be too scared to notice a credit check. My phone rested in the cup holder. One call to the federal authorities and Trent would have agents knocking on his door before dinner. It would be swift and clean. But it would not be enough. If I simply reported the fraud right now, Brenda would spin the narrative to her advantage. She would cry to the extended family that Trent was just a desperate young entrepreneur who made a misguided mistake under immense pressure. She would paint me as the cold, vindictive sister who sent her own flesh and blood to prison over a simple misunderstanding. She would use her therapy speak to call me toxic. She would play the ultimate victim. I could not let her have that stage. I needed them to hang themselves with their own words. I needed a public, undeniable display of their true colors. A setting where they felt confident enough to brag about their leverage before realizing they had none. I needed to look them in the eyes when their world collapsed. I picked up my phone and opened the messaging app, finding my mother's number. The last message I had sent her was 3 years ago, asking her to stop calling my husband derogatory names. I took a deep breath and began typing. Richard called you, I assume. I am angry about the trust document, but I understand Trent is in a bad place financially. I think we need to sit down and talk. Let us have a reconciliation dinner tonight. I hit send. It did not even take a full minute. Brenda was clearly panicking about the poison pill clause and desperate to get me in a room. Her reply popped up. I am glad you are finally acting like an adult, Madeline. We will meet you at the glass house at 8. Do not be late, and wear something nice for once. Zoe is coming, and you know how she hates being seen with people who look shabby. Zoe, my African-American sister-in-law. She was a woman who equated human value entirely with designer labels. She had always looked down on me because I preferred comfortable clothes over haute couture. If Zoe was coming, it meant they were bringing out the heavy artillery. They wanted to intimidate me with false wealth. Her presence would only make the crash louder. I started the car engine, allowing the quiet hum to fill the silence. Before pulling out of the garage, I made one more critical move. I logged back into my secure network and placed a silent digital freeze on the fraudulent loan application in Miami. The bank would not approve it, but they would not reject it either. It would just sit in a digital purgatory, keeping Trent on the hook and accumulating metadata without giving him a single dime to spend. Then I called my friend David, who owned the glass house. David and Noah were close. I told him I needed a table for 4 tonight. I asked for the one exactly in the center of the main dining room, the one where everyone could see and hear exactly what was happening. David laughed and said he would make sure it was ready. I drove out of the parking garage and merged onto the busy highway, heading back to my quiet neighborhood. Brenda and Trent thought they were going to corner me tonight. They thought they were going to use family guilt and emotional manipulation to force my hand. They still believed I was the weak link in the family. They had no idea they were walking blindly into a fully operational trap. Tonight I was not just going to confront my abusers, I was going to completely dismantle them. I pulled into the valet circle at the glass house just before 8 o'clock. The restaurant was a stunning architectural marvel of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city skyline. It was the kind of place where reservations were booked 6 months in advance, and the host knew every prominent figure by their first name. My friend David was standing near the entrance when I walked through the double doors. He gave me a warm smile and a subtle nod, leading me past the crowded bar area directly to the center of the main dining room. The table was perfectly positioned. Everyone in the room would be able to see and hear what was about to happen. I ordered a sparkling water and waited. 10 minutes later, they made their grand entrance. Brenda led the pack, wearing a tailored silk suit that she definitely could not afford on her fixed income. Trent followed closely behind her, trying to look like a successful tech entrepreneur in a designer turtleneck and an expensive blazer. But my eyes immediately locked onto Zoe. My African-American sister-in-law was a striking woman who demanded attention the second she walked into a room. She was wearing a sleek designer dress and towering heels, but it was the accessory in her hand that stole the spotlight. It was a pristine luxury handbag in a rare shade of emerald green leather. A bag that easily retailed for $25,000 on the secondary market. A bag that you could not just walk into a store and buy without a massive purchase history. Zoe carried it like a weapon, holding it out slightly so it would catch the ambient light of the restaurant chandeliers. She reached the table and instead of handing it to the coat check or placing it on an empty chair, she slammed the heavy leather bag directly onto the center of the pristine white tablecloth, right next to my water glass. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Zoe said, her voice carrying over the low hum of the dining room. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my simple black dress. "Still shopping at the discount racks, I see. I would have thought Noah could at least buy you a decent outfit for a night out. Or is he still struggling to find enough lawns to mow this season?" I did not react to the insult. I just kept my eyes locked on the bright green bag sitting on the table. "It really is a shame you could not make it to our wedding in Hawaii." Zoe continued, sliding into the booth next to Trent, though honestly it was probably for the best. "Brenda told us all about your little mental breakdown. An upscale destination wedding is no place for someone struggling with severe instability. We needed good energy, not a dark cloud ruining the photos. Plus, I doubt you could have afforded the luxury resort fees anyway." "Now Zoe, play nice," Brenda scolded, but a cruel smile played on her thin lips. "Madeline is trying to make amends. That is why she invited us here tonight. She knows she overreacted about the trust fund document Richard showed her today. We are all family here and family forgives." Trent leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He looked incredibly smug for a man who was actively committing federal wire fraud. "Mom is right, Madeline. You have been isolated for 3 years. It is making you paranoid. I am running a highly successful technology company now. The loan restructuring is just a minor bridge capital situation. You need to stop being so selfish and look at the bigger picture. We are trying to build generational wealth, and you are standing in the way because of some petty childhood jealousy. I took a slow sip of my cold, sparkling water. I looked at the three of them sitting across from me. They looked incredibly confident in their delusions. Zoe was adjusting her diamond necklace, making sure the restaurant lighting hit the stones perfectly. Brenda was waving down a waiter to order the most expensive bottle of wine without glancing at the prices. And Trent leaned back with a self-satisfied smirk, completely unaware that his digital fingerprints were frozen in my secure server. They honestly believed they held all the power at this table. They thought my silence was a sign of submission. They thought the 3 years I spent away from them had made me desperate for their approval. I placed my glass back down on the table right next to Zoe's $25,000 bag. The bag she was so proud of. The bag that was about to become the centerpiece of my revenge. A waiter in a crisp black vest approached our table, holding a leather-bound wine menu. Brenda did not even open it. She simply waved her hand dismissively and demanded the reserve Cabernet. When the waiter hesitated and mentioned the bottle was $800, Brenda scoffed and told him to just bring it. She acted like she was a billionaire, but I knew her fixed income barely covered the property taxes on her suburban colonial. She was relying entirely on the illusion of wealth to pressure me. Once the waiter poured the dark red wine and retreated, Brenda leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. She adjusted her expression, dropping the haughty attitude and replacing it with the practiced look of a long-suffering mother. It was a face I had seen 1,000 times growing up. Madeline. It breaks my heart to see our family fractured like this. Brenda began, her voice trembling with artificial sorrow. I lay awake at night, wondering where I went wrong with you. I sacrificed my youth, my career, and my own happiness to raise you. I gave you everything a child could possibly want. And how do you repay me? By locking me out of your life for 3 years. By embarrassing me in front of Richard this afternoon. You know he is a very important lawyer in our community. I kept my face perfectly neutral. You hired Richard to threaten me with an elder abuse lawsuit, Brenda. You tried to use a baseless legal threat to steal my portion of grandfather's trust fund. I hardly think me defending myself is embarrassing you. You did that all on your own. Brenda let out a sharp, dramatic sigh and pressed her hand against her chest. I was not trying to steal anything, you ungrateful child. I was trying to save your brother. Trent is on the verge of a massive technological breakthrough. His company is going to change the industry. But because of your selfish stunt at the lawyer's office today, the trust fund restructuring is completely stalled. We do not have weeks to wait for the administrators to sort out your mess. Trent chimed in, swirling the expensive wine in his glass. The startup phase is always capital-intensive, Madeline. You work in tech, so you should understand that. I just need a bridge loan to cover operating costs until the next round of venture funding comes through. The bank requires a guarantor with liquid assets and a flawless credit score. Since you just tied up the family trust, you are going to have to step up and co-sign the commercial loan. He said it with such absolute entitlement that it was almost comical. He was not asking for a favor. He was demanding that I put my entire financial life on the line to subsidize his failure. Let me make sure I understand this, I said, keeping my voice calm and even. You want me to legally guarantee a commercial loan for a company that has zero revenue and a massive burn rate. If you default, the bank will immediately come after my assets, my house, my savings, my firm's reputation. You want me to risk everything I have built so you can keep pretending to be a successful chief executive officer. Zoe rolled her eyes and picked up her water glass. Oh, please, Madeline, stop being so dramatic. It is just a signature. You are not actually paying for anything. Trent will pay it back in a few months when the investors come on board. You are his sister. You owe him this. We are family, and family supports each other. You have always been so selfish, hoarding your little consulting salary, while Trent is out here trying to build a real legacy for all of us. Brenda reached across the table and pointed a manicured finger at me. Zoe is absolutely right. You owe us, Madeline. You owe this family for every meal you ate and every piece of clothing you wore under my roof. You have a duty to help your brother succeed. You have lived in your little suburban bubble with your lawnmower husband long enough. It is time for you to grow up, stop being a victim, and sign the guarantor paperwork. I actually brought the application with me. We can get it notarized tonight. She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a manila folder, slapping it down next to Zoe's bright green bag. It was a blank guarantor application from the exact same regional bank in Miami. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They were actively trying to get me to legally sign for the very same loan they had already fraudulently applied for using my own stolen identity. I stared at the manila folder Brenda had just slapped onto the table. The logo of the Miami Regional Bank was printed clearly in the upper right corner. They were so lazy they did not even try to find a different bank for their backup plan. I did not reach for the pen she offered. Instead, I shifted my gaze to my brother, who was already signaling the waiter for another round of expensive drinks. "Tell me about this revolutionary startup, Trent," I asked, leaning back in my chair and folding my hands in my lap. "If you expect me to put my house and my financial security on the line, I need to conduct a little due diligence. What exactly is your product? You have been talking about this company for a year, but you have never actually explained what it does." Trent rolled his eyes and scoffed loudly, as if my question was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. "It is a decentralized algorithmic data aggregator, Madeline. We are disrupting the supply chain logistics space using machine learning protocols. It is highly complex. I doubt you would understand the back-end architecture, even if I drew it out for you on a napkin." "Try me," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly flat. "Are you using a distributed ledger for the data aggregation? If so, what is your consensus mechanism? Are you utilizing proof of work or proof of stake? How are you securing the endpoints against zero-day exploits? Because supply chain logistics are highly susceptible to ransomware attacks. Have you even run a basic penetration test on your servers yet? And more importantly, what is your current monthly burn rate compared to your active user acquisition cost?" Trent blinked rapidly. His smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second as he tried to process the terminology I had just thrown at him. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He tried to recover his composure by adjusting his designer blazer and clearing his throat. "We are leveraging the cloud, Madeline. It is all cloud-based synergy. We outsource the coding to a boutique firm in Silicon Valley, so I can focus on scaling the brand identity. You do not build a unicorn company by getting bogged down in the minutiae." Beside him, Zoe let out an exasperated sigh and checked her reflection in the blade of her silver butter knife. "Oh, please, Madeline, stop trying to sound smart," Zoe muttered, waving her manicured hand. "He is the chief executive officer. He hires nerds to handle the boring computer stuff. He is the visionary. He does not need to know how the sausage is made. But a visionary still needs a viable product, Trent." I pressed, ignoring Zoe entirely. "Do you have a working prototype? Do you have a single paying beta tester? Or are you just paying yourself a massive salary out of the seed money while you rent luxury cars and pretend to network at expensive steakhouses? Because from where I sit, your business model looks a lot like a black hole for venture capital." Trent slammed his wineglass down on the table. The dark liquid sloshed over the rim, staining the pristine white tablecloth. "You know your problem, Madeline," he snarled, his face flushing with angry red blotches. "You have zero vision, bro. You are just a paranoid IT girl. You sit in a cubicle all day resetting passwords for boomers who forgot how to log into their email. You have absolutely no idea how real business works or how high-level venture capital operates." Brenda immediately jumped to his defense, reaching over to pat his hand soothingly. She glared at me as if I had just insulted a religious deity. "Do not let her upset you, Trent. She is just jealous. She has always been jealous of your ambition and your natural charisma. Madeline, you are acting completely unhinged right now. Your brother is on the verge of becoming a billionaire, and you are interrogating him like a criminal over a standard business loan. Just sign the paper and stop trying to drag him down to your miserable level." "I am not an IT girl, Trent," I said, ignoring my mother and locking eyes with him. "I am a senior consultant for federal cybersecurity architecture." I build defensive networks for government contractors. I track international financial cybercrime for a living. I know exactly how real business works. And I also know how federal wire fraud works. Trent laughed, a harsh, grating sound that carried across the dining room, causing a few heads at nearby tables to turn in our direction. Oh, wow. Federal cybercrime. Did you hear that, Zoe? My little sister thinks she is a secret agent now. He leaned across the table, pointing a finger directly at my face. Listen to me very carefully, you arrogant little nobody. I am offering you a ground floor opportunity to be part of something massive. When my company goes public, you will be begging me for a seat at the table. But right now, all I need from you is a signature. You do not need to understand the tech. You just need to do what you are told for once in your life. I looked at his angry, sweating face. He was so deeply entrenched in his own lies that he actually believed he was untouchable. He thought my career was a joke. He thought my intelligence was an illusion. He had no idea that while he was busy practicing his elevator pitch and buying expensive suits with stolen money, I was the one holding the keys to his entire digital existence. I reached into my own purse, slowly pulling out a crisp, white envelope. It was time to stop playing with my food. It was time to show them exactly what a paranoid IT girl could do. I unsealed the crisp white envelope and slid my fingers inside. Brenda actually smiled, leaning back in her chair. She thought I was pulling out the notarized guarantor application she had just demanded. She thought I had surrendered. Trent even raised his wine glass slightly, as if preparing to toast his own victory. Instead, I pulled out 3 sheets of high-gloss printer paper. I did not hand them to Trent. I placed them flat on the pristine tablecloth and slid them directly over to Zoe, stopping right next to her prized emerald green handbag. Zoe looked down at the papers, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "What is this?" she asked, her tone laced with annoyance. "Are these your little computer charts? I told you we do not care about the technical details." "Look closer, Zoe," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "That is not a technical chart. That is a transaction log from a Miami-based regional bank. Specifically, a log showing a $250,000 commercial line of credit that was opened yesterday morning using my social security number and my flawless credit history." Trent froze. His wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The smug, arrogant expression melted off his face, instantly replaced by a mask of sheer panic. He stared wildly at the documents. I kept my eyes locked on Zoe. "Now look at the second page," I instructed. "That is a digital receipt from a luxury boutique. It shows a point-of-sale transaction processed exactly 48 hours ago for $25,000. The exact retail price of an emerald green leather Hermes bag. The purchase was made using a temporary digital card linked directly to that fraudulent credit line." Zoe stared at the paper and then looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. "I do not know what you are talking about. Trent bought this bag for me as an early anniversary present. He used his corporate account. He told me his startup had just closed a bridge round of funding." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your husband lied to you, Zoe. His startup has zero funding. His corporate accounts are empty. He used my stolen identity to open a fraudulent line of credit, and he used the very first draw to buy you that bag to keep you quiet." Brenda slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. "Madeline, this is outrageous. How dare you accuse your brother of such a heinous crime? You fabricated these documents just to avoid helping him. You are sick. You really do need psychiatric help immediately." I ignored my mother completely. My focus remained entirely on my sister-in-law. The third page. Zoe is an Internet Protocol address trace. I continued, my voice slicing through Brenda's hysterical defense. "It proves that the application for the credit line was submitted from the residential network at your house in Boston. It has a timestamp that matches the exact moment Trent was supposedly working from home on his visionary business model." Zoe's confident posture began to crumble. She looked down at the bag, then back at the papers, her perfectly manicured fingernails digging into her palms. "Trent, tell her she is lying," Zoe demanded, her voice wavering slightly. "Tell her you used your own money." Trent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was staring at the log like it was a venomous snake. He knew he was caught. He knew the digital footprint was absolute, undeniable proof. "Let me explain how federal law works, Zoe," I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Wire fraud carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. Identity theft carries a mandatory minimum consecutive sentence of 2 years. And crossing state lines to commit financial fraud using digital networks elevates the entire case to a federal level. The authorities take these crimes very seriously." Zoe swallowed hard, the color draining from her face. "But I did not do it," she stammered. "I did not apply for the credit card. Trent gave me the bag. I am innocent." "Ignorance is not a valid legal defense when you are holding stolen property," I replied coldly. "You are in possession of goods purchased with fraudulently obtained funds. You brought the evidence across state lines to this dinner. If I walk out of this restaurant and hand these documents over to the authorities, they will not just arrest Trent. They will name you as a co-conspirator. They will seize that bag as evidence and freeze every bank account tied to your name." The silence that descended upon our table was absolute. The background noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Brenda sat frozen. Trent looked like he was about to be sick, and Zoe stared at her prized possession with pure, unadulterated horror. "You thought you could intimidate me with fake wealth," I whispered. "But all you did was bring the murder weapon directly to the crime scene and set it right next to my water glass." The silence shattered like cheap glass. Zoe lunged forward, grabbing the green bag by its handles, as if it had suddenly caught fire. She shoved it across the table, pushing it so hard it knocked over her water goblet. The ice water spilled across the white linen tablecloth, but no one cared. "Trent, you lied to me!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls of the restaurant. "You told me the business was booming. You told me the investors loved your pitch. You bought this with stolen money." Trent reached out, trying to grab her hands. "Zoe, keep your voice down," he hissed, looking around frantically at the other diners, who were now openly staring at our table. "I can explain everything to you later in private. It is just a temporary cash flow solution to keep the company afloat until the next quarter." "Do not touch me," she yelled, swatting his hands away. Her perfectly manicured facade was completely gone, replaced by sheer terror. "I am a partner at a corporate law firm, Trent. I have worked my entire life to build my reputation in this city. If I get dragged into a federal wire fraud investigation, I will lose my license. I will lose my career. I will lose everything. You used me to launder your stolen money, and you bought me off with a cheap distraction." Brenda grabbed Zoe's wrist, her acrylic nails digging sharply into the skin. "Stop making a scene right now, Zoe," Brenda commanded through gritted teeth, her eyes darting around the room. "We are at a highly exclusive public restaurant, and you are embarrassing us. Madeline is just trying to scare you. She is manipulating the data to make Trent look bad." "I am not manipulating anything, Brenda," I said, taking a sip of my sparkling water. "The Federal Bureau of Investigation will not care about your excuses. They will only care about the Internet Protocol logs and the signature on the loan application." Trent was breathing heavily. The collar of his expensive turtleneck looked suddenly suffocating. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and glared at me with pure hatred. "You think you are so smart, Madeline. You think you caught me in some elaborate trap. But you forgot one very important detail." He reached deep into the inner breast pocket of his designer blazer and pulled out a folded piece of heavy stock paper. It looked incredibly old, and the creases were deeply worn from being handled. He unfolded it slowly, his hands still shaking slightly, before smoothing it out on the table, right next to my printed transaction logs and the green leather bag. "I do not need to steal your identity. Trent said, his voice dripping with a sudden desperate arrogance. I already own it. We both do. I looked down at the document. It was a medical and durable financial power of attorney. My signature was scrawled at the bottom, weak and barely legible. I recognized it immediately. 5 years ago, I was in a severe car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light and T-boned my sedan. I woke up in the intensive care unit with 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a severe concussion. I was heavily medicated on strong painkillers, drifting in and out of consciousness for days. During that incredibly hazy and confusing period, Brenda and Trent had visited my quiet hospital room. They told me I needed to sign a standard hospital release form so they could handle my medical bills while I recovered. I foolishly trusted my own family. I signed where they pointed. I did not read the fine print because I could barely keep my eyes open. This is a legally binding, durable power of attorney, Trent declared, tapping the worn paper with his index finger. You signed it 5 years ago in the hospital. It grants Mom and me full authorization to manage your financial accounts, open new lines of credit, and make executive decisions regarding your assets in the event that you are incapacitated or unable to manage your own affairs. Brenda sat up straighter, her confidence returning in a flash. She smiled that familiar, sickeningly sweet smile again. Exactly. Since you have been acting so erratically lately, clearly suffering from some sort of mental breakdown, we simply exercised our legal rights to secure the family finances. It is not wire fraud if I am your legally appointed financial proxy, Trent added, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. I had every legal right to open that commercial credit line. The bank approved it based on this exact document. So go ahead, Madeline. Call the authorities now. You cannot send me to federal prison. You are completely trapped in my web. I looked at the crumpled, heavily creased piece of paper resting on the pristine tablecloth. Trent was leaning back with his arms crossed behind his head, looking like a man who had just won the lottery. Brenda was literally beaming, her chest puffed out with maternal pride, as if her son had just outsmarted a master criminal. They were both so incredibly proud of their deception. You kept that piece of paper for 5 years, I said, keeping my voice low and completely devoid of emotion. You kept it folded up in a drawer, just waiting for the day you would need to use it. You watched me recover from a traumatic brain injury. You watched me struggle to walk unassisted for 3 months. And during all that time, your only thought was how you could weaponize my vulnerability. Trent rolled his eyes and let out a harsh laugh. Oh, stop playing the victim, Madeline. We took care of you. We managed your bills. We earned that proxy. You owed us for the inconvenience of having to sit by your hospital bed while you slept. This is just a return on our investment. Now take your little computer printouts and go home. Let the adults handle the family finances. I did not move. I did not blink. I reached into my purse one final time. I bypassed my wallet and pulled out a stiff, thick piece of legal parchment. It was not folded. It was pristine, crisp, and bore a raised seal from the state probate court. I placed it directly over his 5-year-old piece of paper, completely covering his signature and mine. What is that? Brenda snapped, her smile faltering as she leaned forward to read the bold heading printed at the top of the page. That is a formal, notarized, and court-filed declaration of revocation, I stated clearly. My voice sliced through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a scalpel. You see, Trent, I may have been heavily medicated when I signed your little proxy, but I am not stupid. The moment I was cleared by my neurologist and realized exactly how much money you had already siphoned from my checking account to pay your country club dues, I took action. Trent stared at the raised court seal. His arms dropped slowly to his sides. The arrogant smirk vanished completely, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of dawning horror. Look at the date stamped in red ink in the top right corner, I instructed, pointing to the corner of the document. I filed that revocation exactly 35 months ago. It was the very last thing I did right before I blocked your phone numbers and went completely no contact. I officially and legally stripped you of any and all proxy rights over my medical and financial decisions. I also paid a process server to deliver copies to your respective homes, but I'm guessing you both threw them in the trash without reading them. Zoe let out a sharp gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. She backed away from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the polished hardwood floor. That means the document you presented to the regional bank in Miami was legally void. I continued leaning forward until I was just inches from Trent's terrified face. Presenting a revoked power of attorney to a financial institution to secure a $250,000 commercial loan is not a clever family loophole. It is criminal bank fraud. It elevates your identity theft to a much higher federal tier. This is a forgery. Trent stammered, his voice cracking as he desperately tried to push my document away. You printed this off the internet. You cannot just revoke a durable proxy without a hearing. Actually, you can, I replied. And I did. The bank will confirm it the moment the federal agents execute a warrant on their loan department. Every single dollar you spent on my credit line since that date is an unauthorized fraudulent transaction. That includes the $25,000 bag sitting right next to your wife. It includes the retainers you paid to your lawyers. It includes every single luxury dinner you bought to pretend you were a successful chief executive officer. Brenda looked like she was struggling to breathe. She clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles turning completely white. Madeline, you cannot do this, she gasped, her voice trembling with genuine fear. You are destroying your brother's life. You are destroying our family. You destroyed the family the day you decided my only value was what you could steal from me, I said, standing up from the booth. I looked down at them now. They were no longer a unified front of wealthy, arrogant elites. They were three desperate people realizing the floor had dropped out from beneath them. Zoe was the first to break. She stood up, grabbing her coat from her chair, her hands shaking violently. Her eyes darted from the revoked document to her husband's sweating face. You lied to me about everything, Zoe screamed, no longer caring about the exclusive atmosphere. Diners at adjacent tables stopped eating, turning to watch the spectacle. Waiters froze in the aisles. You told me the venture capital firms were delaying the transfer. But there is no tech startup. Is there, Trent? There never was an algorithmic data aggregator. Zoe, please keep your voice down, Trent begged, reaching out. People are staring. I can fix this. I just need time. Do not touch me, Zoe shrieked, slapping his hand away. What capital? You have a massive gambling addiction. Trent physically recoiled as if she had struck him. Brenda let out a gasp, clamping her hands over her mouth. Zoe glared at her husband with pure disgust. You think I am stupid? You think I do not see the offshore betting applications on your phone when you are passed out drunk? You think I do not hear you screaming at the television during football games when you blow the mortgage payment? You are not a chief executive officer. You are a degenerate gambler who blew our entire savings on high-stakes poker and margin calls. And when you ran out of our money, you decided to steal your sister's identity to keep feeding your sickness. That is a lie, Brenda yelled, jumping up to defend her golden boy. Her face was flushed purple with rage. Trent is a brilliant entrepreneur. He takes calculated risks to build wealth. You are just a hysterical woman trying to ruin his reputation to save your own skin. Zoe whipped her head around to face Brenda, her expression turning absolutely feral. Oh, shut up, Brenda. Do not stand there and pretend you did not know about his debts. You are just as sick as he is. You enabled every single bet he placed. Zoe, please. Trent whimpered, sinking lower into his chair, trying to hide from the glaring eyes of the entire restaurant. No, I am done covering for you, Zoe spat. I am done pretending we are some high society family while we drown in debt. I know exactly how you paid off his bookie last month, Brenda. I heard the two of you whispering in the kitchen when you thought I was asleep. Brenda froze, the color rapidly draining from her purple face. She looked at Zoe with a pleading terror I had never seen her display before. Do not say it, Brenda whispered, her voice cracking. Zoe, I am begging you, do not say another word. Why should I protect your secrets when your son just tied me to a federal crime? Zoe demanded. She turned to look directly at me, her chest heaving with exertion. Your mother did not just use her pension to bail him out, Madeline. She sold your grandmother Dorothy's heirloom jewelry. The vintage diamond necklace, the ruby earrings, all of it. The heirlooms she swore were locked in a safe deposit box waiting for your wedding day. She took them to a high-end pawnbroker in downtown Boston and sold them for pennies on the dollar to cover Trent's margin calls. She pawned your inheritance to pay for his gambling debts. The restaurant was dead silent. I stared at my mother. The grandmother who had been the only source of warmth in my childhood, the woman whose jewelry was meant to be passed down through the generations, had been fenced to pay off a sports bookie. Brenda could not even look me in the eye. She sank back into the booth, staring down at her empty hands, her entire body trembling uncontrollably. The lifelong facade of the perfect golden child was now completely obliterated. Trent was clearly not a misunderstood genius. He was just a desperate criminal addict. And Brenda was absolutely not a dedicated mother making sacrifices. She was an accomplice who had sold off family history to fund a felony. "I am filing for divorce tomorrow morning," Zoe announced, her voice cold and final. "I am taking our daughter, and I am going to my parents' house tonight. Do not try to call me. Do not come near us. You are going to federal prison, Trent, and I am not letting you drag me down with you." She turned on her heel, her designer shoes clicking sharply against the hardwood floor as she marched out of the restaurant. She did not look back even once, leaving the extremely expensive emerald green leather bag sitting completely abandoned on the pristine white table. The heavy glass doors of the restaurant swung shut behind Zoe, leaving a deafening silence in her wake. Trent sat paralyzed in the booth, staring at the empty space where his wife had just been. His breathing was shallow and rapid. The illusion of his success was entirely shattered. He was not a tech genius. He was not a visionary. He was just a broke addict who had just lost his marriage and was staring down the barrel of a federal indictment. He looked small and pathetic, shrinking into the expensive leather seating. Brenda, however, did not collapse into despair. Instead, I watched her transition from sheer terror to absolute unhinged fury. Her hands curled into tight fists resting on the white tablecloth. The veins in her neck bulged against her pearl necklace. She could not accept that her golden child was a failure, and she certainly could not accept that I was the one who had exposed him. In her twisted mind, I was not the victim of identity theft. I was the villain who had maliciously destroyed her perfect family out of pure spite. "You did this!" Brenda hissed, her voice vibrating with a dark, venomous hatred. "You planned this entire dinner just to humiliate us. You manipulated Zoe against her own husband. You are a monster, Madeline." "I did not make Trent steal my identity, Brenda," I replied calmly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "And I certainly did not make him gamble away your savings or force you to pawn family heirlooms. I just brought the receipts." Something inside Brenda completely snapped. She grabbed her wine glass, her knuckles turning white around the crystal stem. With a sudden violent jerk, she hurled the $800 Reserve Cabernet directly at my face. The dark red liquid splashed heavily against my skin and soaked into the fabric of my simple black dress. The cold wine dripped down my cheeks and stung my eyes. The sound of the splashing liquid caused several diners to gasp loudly. The restaurant manager immediately started walking briskly toward our table, his face pale with concern. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I did not even wipe the wine away immediately. I sat perfectly still, letting her witness my absolute lack of fear. I slowly reached for a white linen napkin from the table and calmly wiped the dark wine from my eyes. "You think you have won?" Brenda screamed, ignoring the manager who was now standing just a few feet away. "You think you can just walk away and leave us with nothing? You think your little computer printouts make you untouchable? Well, you are wrong, Madeline. You are dead wrong. I will not let you destroy my son and walk away smiling." She leaned across the table, her face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "I know all about the National Landscape Architecture Awards tomorrow night. I know your pathetic husband is nominated for some ridiculous prize. You think you can expose my son and just go celebrate with your glorified lawnmower. I am not going to let that happen. The manager stepped forward. Sir, ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to lower your voices or leave the premises immediately. We have other guests trying to enjoy their evening. Brenda turned and glared at the man. Shut up, she snapped before turning her wild eyes back to me. Tomorrow night, I'm going to walk right into the middle of that gala Madeline. I'm going to take the microphone, and I am going to expose Noah in front of the entire city. I will tell all those wealthy elites that he is a con artist who manipulated a mentally unstable woman to steal her family trust fund. I will tell them he is a fraud. I will ruin his business. I will make sure he never gets another contract in this state. By the time I am done with him, he will be begging to mow lawns for minimum wage. I carefully folded the wine-stained napkin and placed it on the table. Brenda was so consumed by her own toxic delusions that she honestly believed a public temper tantrum could destroy my husband. She had no idea that Noah was not just a nominee, but the overwhelming favorite to win the most prestigious award of the night. She had no idea that the event would be heavily secured and filled with federal contractors who were personal friends of ours. She was blindly walking into a massive trap. I picked up my crisp court document and the IP trace logs, slipping them safely back into my purse. I left the fake guarantor application and the green bag sitting on the table. Do whatever you feel is necessary, Brenda, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing whisper. But remember this moment. Remember that I gave you a chance to walk away quietly, and you chose to declare war. I stood up from the booth and turned to the manager, handing him my sleek metal credit card. Please process the bill for the entire table, I told him. And please keep the green bag in the back office. The authorities will be coming to collect it as evidence very soon. I did not look back at my mother or my brother as I walked out of the restaurant. As I reached the host stand near the front entrance, I paused. The manager had followed me, holding the payment terminal and my metal credit card. I reached out and gently took my card back from his hand. Change of plans, I told him, making sure my voice carried through the quiet acoustic space of the lobby. Please cancel that transaction and charge only my sparkling water to this card. You can hand the check for the $800 wine and whatever else they ordered directly to the gentleman in the turtleneck. He is the chief executive officer of a highly profitable tech startup, so I am sure he will be thrilled to cover his own tab. The manager nodded with a knowing professional smile and pivoted, heading straight back toward their booth. Trent had absolutely no liquid capital, and his credit cards were completely maxed out. Watching him try to talk his way out of an astronomical restaurant bill was a humiliation he thoroughly deserved. I pushed through the heavy glass double doors and stepped out into the cool evening air. The valet brought my car around immediately, sensing the urgency in my posture. I slipped a $20 bill into his hand and slid into the quiet sanctuary of the driver's seat. The adrenaline that had kept my hands perfectly steady inside the dining room was finally beginning to recede, leaving behind a cold and incredibly sharp focus. I grabbed a package of wet wipes from my glove compartment and began scrubbing the sticky red wine from my face and neck. The expensive vintage smelled like fermented grapes and desperate anger. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, refusing to let a single drop of my mother's toxic rage remain on me. My dress was ruined, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I picked up my phone from the passenger seat and dialed Noah. He answered on the first ring. "Are you okay?" he asked, his deep voice instantly grounding me. "I am perfectly fine," I replied, tossing the stained wipes into a plastic bag. But Brenda threw a glass of reserve Cabernet in my face and promised to crash the architecture awards tomorrow night. She wants to expose you as a glorified lawnmower in front of the entire city planning commission. Noah let out a rich, genuine laugh that filled the small space of the car. He was not intimidated in the slightest. His ecological design firm had just secured a massive municipal contract, and he was the overwhelming favorite to win the most prestigious award of the night. "Let her try," he said smoothly, his confidence unwavering. "Security at the venue is already tight, but I will personally make sure they let her in. If she wants a public audience to air her delusions, we should absolutely give her one. Have you initiated the digital asset freeze yet? I started the car engine, the low hum vibrating through the steering wheel. The initial locks are in place, but I am pulling the final trigger right now, I told him. By midnight, Trent will not be able to buy a cup of coffee, let alone a plane ticket out of state. Good, Noah said. Come home safely. We have a very big night tomorrow. I ended the call and opened my encrypted contact list. I scrolled past my civilian numbers and tapped the direct line for Special Agent Reynolds at the Federal Bureau of Investigation White Collar Crime Division. Reynolds and I had collaborated on several massive cybersecurity breaches involving federal contractors. He knew my work, and he trusted my data implicitly. He picked up on the second ring. Madeline, he answered, his tone professional and sharp. Tell me you have a new puzzle for me. I have a wire fraud and identity theft case, I told him, pulling out of the restaurant driveway and merging onto the busy avenue. The perpetrator used a revoked durable power of attorney to open a $250,000 commercial line of credit across state lines. The Internet Protocol logs traced directly back to a residential address in Boston. Reynolds whistled softly over the secure line. That is a solid federal offense. Do you have the physical evidence to back up the digital trail? I have the digital data packets, the forged proxy document, and the court-stamped revocation I confirmed. There is also a $25,000 piece of stolen property, currently sitting in the back office of the Glass House restaurant downtown. The manager is holding it for you, but the perpetrator is going to be at the National Landscape Architecture Gala tomorrow night. He is planning to cause a massive scene. I think it would be the perfect place for you to execute the arrest warrant. Send me the data packets, Reynolds said, his voice tightening with predatory interest. I will get the federal magistrate to sign the warrant by morning. I will see you at the gala, Madeline. Dress nicely. I ended the call with Special Agent Reynolds and turned onto the quiet private road leading directly to our house. I drove up the winding driveway to our sprawling modern architectural masterpiece, constructed of sustainable materials and glass. It completely contradicted my mother's deep-seated delusion that Noah was struggling. I parked in the garage and stepped into the warm light of our expansive kitchen. Noah was standing at the massive quartz island reviewing a set of digital blueprints on his tablet. He looked up as I walked in and his smile faded instantly. His eyes locked onto the dark red wine stain currently ruining my dress. He set the tablet down, walking around the island with long, deliberate strides. He did not ask if I was hurt. He knew me too well for that. He simply looked at the stain and then met my eyes. I am guessing reconciliation is officially off the table, Noah said, his voice a low, calm rumble. Zoe left him, I replied, kicking off my heels and leaning against the cool quartz counter. Trent is officially drowning in gambling debt. Brenda pawned my grandmother's vintage jewelry to cover his margin calls, and then she threw an $800 glass of wine at my face because I brought the receipts. And as a grand finale, she promised to crash your awards gala tomorrow night to expose you as a fraud who married me for my non-existent trust fund. Noah crossed his arms, leaning back against the cool quartz counter next to me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. He shook his head, running a hand through his dark hair. It is actually fascinating how completely blind they are to reality, he murmured. She wants to expose me in a room filled with the mayor, the city council, and 50 of my top corporate clients. I am almost tempted to give her a microphone just to watch her try. I already invited a +1 for her, I said, pulling my secure laptop out of my bag. Special Agent Reynolds is bringing a federal arrest warrant, but we need to make sure Trent and Brenda cannot access a single dime before tomorrow night. If they realize how much trouble they are actually in, they might try to run. Let us lock them down. Noah agreed, his demeanor instantly shifting into purely strategic focus. We moved into my home office, a soundproof room, equipped with multiple high-resolution monitors and an encrypted server rack. I sat at the desk, and Noah stood behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders as my fingers began flying across the mechanical keyboard. I securely transferred the digital evidence packets directly to Reynolds. Next, I logged into the trust fund's administrative portal using my verified credentials. Because the poison pill clause had been formally triggered by their legal demand, I had the authority to request an immediate emergency freeze on all outbound distributions. I drafted the digital affidavit, attached the signed demand letter from their lawyer Richard, and submitted it to the primary trustees. Now for the commercial accounts, I said, pulling up the banking backend. I cannot freeze Trent's personal checking account directly, but I can flag his social security number across the shared fraud network. Because he is an active suspect in a federal wire fraud investigation involving my identity, I can file an automated suspicious activity report. Noah watched the code scrolling across the screen. What does that actually do in real time? He asked. It triggers an algorithmic lockdown, I explained, hitting the execute command. The moment this report hits the national database, every financial institution he uses will automatically suspend his cards and freeze his assets, pending a manual review. He will not be able to withdraw cash, buy a plane ticket, or even pay for an Uber. By tomorrow morning, he will be completely financially paralyzed. Noah reached over and tapped a specific line of code on my monitor. And Brenda. I smiled, typing a final command. I am flagging her accounts as an accomplice to the wire fraud. Since she shares a joint account with Trent to funnel his gambling money, her assets will be temporarily frozen under the same suspicious activity report. I hit enter. The screen flashed a bright green confirmation message. The digital locks slammed shut simultaneously across multiple banking networks. It was done. They were entirely trapped with no money and no way out. Noah leaned down and pressed a kiss to the top of my head. He looked at the green confirmation screen and then down at me, his eyes filled with quiet pride. Now, he whispered, let us go pick out a new dress for you. We have a show to put on tomorrow night. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our bedroom, casting long, bright shadows across the hardwood floor. I woke up feeling more rested than I had in 3 years. There was no anxiety, no lingering guilt about cutting my family off. There was only the cold, sharp anticipation of the trap snapping shut. Noah was already awake, dressed in a crisp white dress shirt and dark trousers, sipping dark roast coffee at the kitchen island. He slid a fresh steaming mug toward me as I sat down and flipped open my secure laptop. The digital trap we had set last night was primed, but morning business hours meant it was time for the official legal mechanisms to kick into high gear. At exactly 8 o'clock, I made my first phone call. I dialed the senior partner managing my late grandfather's trust fund. I informed him that the poison pill clause had been formally triggered by a written legal demand from my mother's attorney. I instructed him to file the emergency injunction, immediately preventing any asset distribution to Brenda or Trent. The lawyer, who had known my grandfather personally, assured me the paperwork was already being filed with the probate court. The trust was on complete lockdown. My next check was the banking portal. The suspicious activity reports we filed last night had been processed by the federal fraud algorithms. The regional bank in Miami had officially frozen the fraudulent $250,000 credit line. But more importantly, the algorithmic flag had cascaded across Trent and Brenda's shared financial network. Every single joint account, every checking balance, and every credit card tied to their social security numbers was now suspended pending a federal review. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching the dashboard on my monitor, and then it started. At 9:15, my phone buzzed against the court's countertop. It was an automated notification from the credit monitoring system I had permanently linked to Trent's profile. He was attempting to authorize a transaction. I clicked the alert and smiled. He was at a high-end bespoke menswear boutique downtown. The transaction attempt was for $4,500. He was trying to rent or buy a designer tuxedo for the gala tonight. The status code next to the transaction read, "Declined suspected fraud." I watched the screen, imagining his arrogant face dropping as the cashier handed his titanium card back to him. 3 minutes later, another alert popped up. He tried a different credit card at the same boutique. Declined. 2 minutes after that, he tried a debit card linked to Brenda's account. Insufficient funds, frozen asset. He is awake, Noah noted, looking over my shoulder at the cascading red notifications on the screen. He is panicking, I replied, leaning back in my chair. He needs to look wealthy tonight to maintain his illusion. By 10:30, the alerts became increasingly frantic. He had left the menswear boutique and moved to an exotic car rental agency. Trent was trying to put down a $3,000 deposit to rent a Bentley Continental for the evening. He wanted to pull up to the National Landscape Architecture Gala, looking like a billionaire tech visionary. He swiped his primary business card. Declined. He tried his personal gold card. Declined. He even tried a digital payment app connected to his phone. Blocked. The metadata was painting a hilarious picture of total desperation. Over the next 2 hours, I tracked his digital footprint as he spiraled downward. He went from trying to rent a Bentley to attempting to secure a standard luxury sedan at a commercial rental chain. Declined. By noon, he was trying to authorize a mere $100 charge at a cheap off-the-rack suit rental shop in a rundown strip mall. Declined. His entire financial existence had been completely erased overnight, and he had absolutely no idea why. Brenda was not faring any better. At 1 o'clock, an alert pinged showing an attempted charge at an exclusive hair salon for an expensive blowout and styling appointment. Declined. She tried a second card. Declined. She tried a third. Declined. My mother, who prided herself on presenting a flawless, wealthy image to the world, was currently sitting in a salon chair, unable to pay for her own hair appointment. They are completely cornered, I said, closing the laptop with a satisfying click. They have no money, no credit, and no leverage. And instead of realizing they need to hide, they are still going to come to the gala tonight, just out of pure spite. Noah finished his coffee and placed the empty mug in the stainless steel sink. He adjusted his silver cufflinks, his expression radiating pure, calm confidence. "Good," he said softly, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "Let them come. They wanted an audience, Madeline. Tonight we are going to give them the absolute best seats in the entire house." The rest of the afternoon passed with a quiet, focused intensity. We did not speak about Brenda or Trent. We did not need to. The digital net was cast, and all that remained was waiting for them to walk blindly into it. At 5 o'clock, I stepped into our master bathroom to begin getting ready for the National Landscape Architecture Gala. The dress Noah had surprised me with was a stunning floor-length gown in a deep midnight blue silk. It fit flawlessly, hugging my frame, with an elegant architectural precision that matched the aesthetic of his award-nominated designs. It was a stark contrast to the simple black dress my mother had ruined with her wine-throwing tantrum the night before. I pulled my dark hair up into a sleek twist, securing it tightly. I kept my makeup sharp and understated, applying a dark berry lipstick that made me look completely unbothered. When I walked out of the bathroom, Noah was already dressed. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our bedroom, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke charcoal tuxedo. The tailoring was impeccable, making his broad shoulders look even more commanding. He did not look like a glorified lawnmower. He looked like exactly what he was, a highly successful corporate visionary at the absolute top of his field. He turned to me, and his breath caught slightly. "You look incredible, Madeline," he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. He closed the distance between us, wrapping his arms around my waist and pressing a warm kiss to my bare shoulder. I smiled, leaning into his solid strength. We stood there for a moment, simply enjoying the quiet sanctuary of our home before the storm hit. Then the heavy silence was broken by the sharp buzzing of Noah's phone resting on the mahogany dresser. He pulled back slightly, glancing over at the glowing screen. "It is a voicemail on my public business line," he noted, picking up the device. "The caller identification shows a restricted number, but the area code is local." He tapped the screen to play the message on speakerphone. The audio hissed with static for a brief second before my mother's voice blasted into our quiet bedroom. "Noah, you arrogant little grifter!" Brenda snarled, her words slurring slightly as if she had already been drinking to calm her nerves. "Do not think you won just because you and your ungrateful wife ran away from the restaurant last night. You think you are so safe hiding behind your fake little landscaping business. You think you can just steal my daughter's trust fund and ruin my son without facing any consequences. Well, you are in for a massive surprise tonight. I know exactly where you are going to be." I am going to walk right up to that stage, and I am going to rip the mask off your face in front of the mayor, the city council, and every single one of your wealthy clients. By the time I am finished telling them how you manipulated my mentally unstable daughter, you will be totally ruined. I am going to enjoy watching you lose everything. You better be ready because I am bringing the storm. The voicemail ended with a sharp, aggressive click. Noah and I stared at the phone. She was so blinded by her own narcissism that she actually thought calling a business line to leave a recorded threat of premeditated defamation was a smart move. She had just handed us the exact weapon we needed to justify a massive security response. Noah did not look angry. He actually looked deeply amused. She just could not resist the urge to monologue, he said, shaking his head. He tapped the screen, isolating the audio file. I pulled my phone from my clutch. Send that file directly to me, I instructed. Noah transferred the recording, and I immediately forwarded the encrypted audio packet to Special Agent Reynolds. I typed a quick text to accompany the file. Audio proof of premeditated intent to cause a public disturbance and defame a federal contractor. Suspect confirms she will be arriving at the venue tonight. Reynolds replied less than 30 seconds later. Received. Warrant is signed. My team is already in position at the venue. See you soon. I locked my phone and slid it back into my silk clutch. The trap was no longer just set. It was fully armed, locked, and loaded with federal backing. I looked at Noah, who was giving himself one final check in the mirror. He adjusted his silk lapel and offered me his arm. Are you ready to go win an award and watch an empire crumble? He asked, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. I took his arm, ready to watch them fall. The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was a sea of crystal chandeliers and black tie elegance. We arrived in a sleek town car, and the moment we stepped onto the red carpet, the camera flashes began. The National Landscape Architecture Gala was not just an industry event. It was a gathering of the most powerful political and financial figures in the state. Mayors, corporate investors, and media correspondents mingled, holding flutes of expensive champagne. I walked beside Noah, feeling the luxurious weight of my midnight blue silk gown. People parted for him, offering handshakes and congratulations before the ceremony even began. He was the star of the evening. I scanned the perimeter of the massive room. Standing near the catering entrance, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, was Special Agent Reynolds. He caught my eye and gave a single subtle nod. His federal team was already dispersed throughout the venue, blending in flawlessly with the security staff. The trap was invisible but inescapable. Dinner was a lavish four-course affair, but my appetite was non-existent. The anticipation humming in my veins was far better than any meal. As the dessert plates were cleared, the master of ceremonies stepped up to the crystal podium. He spoke about innovation, sustainability, and the future of urban design. Then he announced Noah's name for the highest honor of the night, the Visionary Excellence Award. The entire ballroom erupted into deafening applause. Noah stood, buttoned his tuxedo jacket, and kissed my cheek before walking up the carpeted stairs to the stage. He looked incredibly powerful standing under the bright spotlights. He adjusted the microphone and began his keynote speech. He did not boast or brag. He spoke about building foundations that last. He spoke about truth in design and how superficial facades always crumble when tested by the elements. The irony of his words in relation to my family was poetic. The crowd hung on his every word, completely captivated by the man my mother had dismissed as a glorified lawnmower. He was halfway through a sentence about community integrity when a loud crash echoed from the back of the room. The heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom were shoved open with such violent force that they slammed against the brass wall stops. The sound cut through the silent, attentive crowd like a gunshot. Everyone turned their heads. The camera crews pivoted their heavy lenses. Standing in the doorway, breathing heavily, were Brenda, Trent, and Zoe. Seeing my sister-in-law surprised me for a fraction of a second after her dramatic exit at the restaurant. But the rigid, furious posture she held told the entire story. Brenda had clearly blackmailed her. My mother had likely threatened to call Zoe's corporate law firm, and spin the wire fraud as her mastermind idea if she did not show up to play the supportive wife one last time. Zoe was trapped trying to protect her career. They stepped into the bright light of the ballroom, and the reality of their disastrous day was immediately obvious. They tried to walk with their usual haughty arrogance, but the visual evidence of their frozen bank accounts was undeniable. Trent was not wearing a rented designer tuxedo. He was wearing an old suit from 5 years ago that was visibly tight across his shoulders and completely out of style. His face was flushed and sweating profusely. Brenda was wearing a dress I recognized from a wedding she attended a decade ago, and her hair was pulled back into a severe messy bun because her salon cards had been declined. They looked unhinged, unkempt, and entirely out of place among the city's elite. A team of event ushers in black vests immediately approached them asking for their invitations. Brenda shoved the nearest usher aside with a forceful push. "Get your hands off me!" Brenda shrieked, her voice echoing terribly through the high ceilings of the ballroom. "I do not need an invitation. That is my son-in-law up there." The murmurs began immediately. Shocked whispers rippled through the hundreds of seated guests. Noah stopped speaking, but he did not look panicked. He stood at the podium, resting his hands on the edges of the crystal stand, simply watching them march down the center aisle. Trent looked terrified under the glaring lights, but Brenda was propelled by pure toxic adrenaline. She marched directly toward the stage, pointing a shaking finger at Noah. "Stop looking at him like he is some kind of hero," Brenda yelled to the confused crowd. "He is a fraud and a thief." I sat at my table perfectly still. The entire room was watching. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Special Agent Reynolds step out from the shadows, moving silently toward the center aisle. The public destruction Brenda had promised was happening exactly as she wanted, but she was the one holding the detonator to her own life. The public destruction Brenda had promised was happening exactly as she wanted, but she was the one holding the detonator to her own life. She stomped down the center aisle, her cheap heels clicking loudly against the polished marble floor before she hit the plush red carpet leading to the stage. Security guards in black suits moved swiftly to intercept her, blocking her path at the base of the stairs. "Mom, you need to step back," one of the guards ordered, reaching out to take her arm. Up on the stage, Noah simply raised his right hand. He gave the security team a subtle wave, signaling them to stand down. "Let her up," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. The guards hesitated, looking toward the event coordinator in the wings, but Noah nodded again. "It is all right. She has something she desperately needs to share with all of us tonight." The guards stepped aside. Brenda shot them a look of venomous triumph before marching up the carpeted stairs. Trent remained frozen at the back of the room near the entrance, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Zoe stood rigidly beside him, her arms crossed tight against her chest, her expression a mask of pure mortification. She knew exactly what was about to happen, and she was bracing for the impact. Brenda reached the center of the stage. She stood next to Noah, looking like a complete chaotic mess next to his immaculate tailoring. Without a shred of hesitation, she reached out and snatched the heavy silver microphone right out of his hand. Noah did not resist. He simply took half a step back, giving her the floor. Brenda turned to face the audience of 500 elite guests. She took a deep, shaky breath and instantly manufactured a look of profound maternal devastation. Tears welled up in her eyes right on cue. "Look at this man," she cried, her voice echoing through the massive ballroom. Her tone was dripping with theatrical agony. "Look at him standing here accepting your awards and your money. You all think he is some brilliant visionary. You think he is an honorable businessman. But you are applauding a monster." A collective gasp ripped through the audience. Mayors, city council members, and billionaire investors sat frozen in their seats. The clinking of silverware stopped completely. The silence in the room was so absolute you could hear the soft whir of the camera lenses zooming in on Brenda's tear-streaked face. "I am a mother," Brenda sobbed, clutching her chest with her free hand. I am a mother who has spent the last 3 years in pure agony because this man, this arrogant grifter, manipulated my mentally unstable daughter. He brainwashed her. He convinced her that her own family was toxic so he could isolate her and control her entirely. My daughter Madeline is sick. She needs serious psychiatric help. But instead of getting her the care she needs, he weaponized her paranoia against us. She pointed an accusing finger at Noah, who simply stood there with a faint, polite smile on his face. He is not a successful architect, she yelled, her voice growing more shrill and desperate. He is a fraud. He started out cutting grass and he is still just a glorified lawnmower wearing a rented tuxedo. He married my vulnerable daughter for one reason only, her trust fund. And yesterday he finally made his move. Brenda wiped a fake tear from her cheek, pacing slightly across the stage. She was entirely in her element, treating the prestigious gala like an episode of a cheap daytime talk show. He forced her to illegally lock down our family trust fund, she declared. He froze my accounts. He froze the accounts of my brilliant son Trent, who is standing right back there. Trent is trying to build a technology company that will change the world, but this man stole our bridge capital to fund his own pathetic landscaping business. He left us with absolutely nothing. We could not even afford to rent a car to get here tonight. Another wave of shocked murmurs swept through the crowd. Some people looked appalled. Others looked eagerly back and forth between Brenda and Noah, waiting for the confrontation to explode. I sat at my table in the front row sipping my sparkling water. I could see Special Agent Reynolds moving closer to the front, his hand resting lightly on his belt. He is a con artist. Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. He is stealing your municipal contracts, just like he stole my daughter's inheritance. If you give him this award tonight, you are endorsing a criminal. You need to investigate his finances. You need to arrest him. I came here tonight to warn you all before he robs this city blind. She stood there, chest heaving, clutching the microphone like a weapon. She had laid all her cards on the table. She had publicly accused a federal contractor of fraud, theft, and elder abuse in front of the most powerful people in the state. She thought she had just delivered the fatal blow. She waited for the crowd to turn on Noah. She waited for the security guards to grab him. Instead, Noah casually adjusted his cuffs. He looked at the frantic woman panting in front of him, and then looked out at the silent sea of shocked faces. He did not look angry or embarrassed. He looked completely and utterly bored. He turned his head and locked eyes with me in the front row, giving me a slow, deliberate wink. Noah kept his eyes locked on mine for a brief second, before turning his attention back to the frantic woman standing beside him. He did not snatch the microphone back or yell for security. Instead, he offered Brenda a polite, chillingly calm smile. "Are you quite finished, Brenda?" he asked, his voice projecting easily. "Because if you are done airing your fabricated grievances, I believe there is someone else who should have a turn to speak." Noah stepped aside, gesturing elegantly toward the front row. He held out his hand to me. The sea of faces immediately shifted their gaze following his direction. I stood up, smoothing the skirt of my midnight blue silk gown. I did not rush. I walked up the carpeted stairs with measured, deliberate steps, projecting an aura of absolute control. The contrast between my tailored elegance and my mother's disheveled, chaotic appearance was glaringly obvious. I reached the center of the stage, and Noah gently placed the heavy silver microphone into my hand. He stepped back, giving me the floor just as he had given it to her. I turned to face the audience. I did not adopt Brenda's theatrical tears or her shrill, panicked tone. I spoke with the icy precision of a cybersecurity consultant, neutralizing a threat. "Good evening, everyone." I began, my voice ringing clear and steady across the silent ballroom. "My name is Madeline. I am Noah's wife, and unfortunately, I am also the daughter of the woman who just tried to hijack this beautiful evening. I apologize for the interruption, but since my mother decided to make this a public forum, I think it is only fair that we conclude it publicly." I turned slightly to look directly at Brenda, who was suddenly looking less triumphant and more confused. Her chest was still heaving, but the absolute lack of panic from Noah and me was clearly throwing her off balance. Brenda claims that I am mentally unstable. I continued holding the microphone perfectly steady. She claims Noah brainwashed me to steal a family trust fund. She wants you to believe my husband is a fraud hiding behind a fake landscaping business. Let me clarify a few facts. I am a senior cybersecurity consultant for federal defense contractors. I hold a high-level security clearance requiring rigorous psychological and financial evaluations every single year. If I were mentally unstable, or if my husband were a con artist, I would not have my job, and we certainly would not be standing on this stage. A low murmur of realization rippled through the front rows. The investors and city officials were listening intently, their earlier shock rapidly transforming into calculated scrutiny. As for the family trust fund, I said, pacing slowly toward Brenda, forcing her to take a step back. I did not illegally lock it down. The fund was automatically frozen by its own administrators because Brenda and her son Trent attempted to alter the distribution charter to bail Trent out of massive gambling debts. They tried to use extortion to steal my inheritance, and they triggered a legal poison pill clause that completely disinherited them. They did it to themselves. Brenda's face turned a sickening shade of gray. "You are lying," she hissed, though she forgot to speak into the microphone. "You are spinning stories to cover for him." I ignored her completely, addressing the crowd once more. But they did not stop at trying to manipulate a trust fund. I projected my voice, reaching the furthest corners of the massive room. When that failed, they decided to commit a federal crime. Yesterday morning, my brother Trent used a forged, durable power of attorney to steal my identity. He crossed state lines digitally to open a fraudulent $250,000 commercial credit line at a regional bank in Miami. He used my name and my flawless credit score to fund his lies. And my mother, sitting right here, was his active accomplice. The collective gasp from the audience this time was much louder. The word federal hung heavy in the opulent air. "That is why they are so angry tonight," I explained, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "They are not here to protect anyone. They are here because last night I tracked their digital footprints and filed suspicious activity reports. The algorithmic fraud protocols activated this morning and completely froze every single bank account tied to their names. They could not rent a luxury car. They could not pay for a salon visit. They are standing here right now because they have absolutely zero liquid assets left." Brenda lunged forward, her hands curling into claws, but Noah effortlessly stepped between us, shielding me. "Do not take my word for it," I said, raising my free hand and pointing directly toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom. "I work with federal contractors, which means I know exactly who to call when someone commits wire fraud. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the back of the room." Every head in the massive ballroom turned simultaneously. Standing perfectly still, bathed in the ambient light of the corridor, was Special Agent Reynolds. He stepped forward into the ballroom, followed closely by 4 other agents wearing dark windbreakers with the bright yellow letters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation printed clearly on the back. "Allow me to introduce Special Agent Reynolds," I announced loud and clear, my voice echoing with finality. "He is the head of the White-Collar Financial Crimes Division, and he did not come tonight for the expensive catering." Special Agent Reynolds stepped fully into the bright light, his gold badge clearly visible on his leather belt. The 4 agents fanned out, blocking the exits. Panic washed over Trent. He stumbled backward, bumping into Zoe, who immediately stepped away from him like a contagion. Brenda, however, was completely paralyzed. Her theatrical tears had vanished, leaving only the stark, terrifying reality of her situation. She stared at the federal agents with wide, unblinking eyes. "You see, ladies and gentlemen," I continued, my voice slicing through the heavy silence of the room, "my mother did not come here tonight to save me or to warn you about a fraudulent contractor. She and Trent are only standing in this room right now because they have absolutely nowhere else to go. 4 hours ago, when the fraud algorithms locked their network, they panicked. They tried to run. The Internet Protocol logs show they attempted to purchase 3 first-class tickets to a non-extradition country this afternoon." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, laced with genuine shock and profound disgust. But they could not flee, I said, taking a slow, deliberate step closer to Brenda. Because every single credit card they own was declined. Their savings are locked. Their checking accounts are suspended. They could not even afford a cheap domestic flight out of the state, let alone an international escape. So cornered and desperate, they decided to come here. They decided that if they were going to lose everything, they would try to inflict as much collateral damage as possible on the way down. They wanted to destroy Noah's reputation out of pure spite. That is a complete fabrication, Brenda shrieked, suddenly finding her voice again. Her tone was no longer that of a weeping, heartbroken mother. It was harsh, grating, and utterly desperate. She is making this up to ruin us. She hacked our accounts. She is a cyber terrorist. Do not listen to her. Noah put her up to this. They are trying to frame my innocent son. I did not argue with her. I did not raise my voice to match her frantic screaming. I simply reached inside my dark silk clutch. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, unlocking the encrypted audio file Noah had forwarded to me earlier. I am not asking you to take my word for it. I told the audience, holding the phone up high for everyone to see. I am just going to let my mother speak for herself. This is the voicemail she left on my husband's public business line at 5 o'clock this evening, right after she realized her credit cards were completely useless. I held the phone directly against the heavy silver microphone and pressed play. The audio hissed loudly through the state-of-the-art ballroom sound system. Then Brenda's slurred, venomous voice boomed across the silent room. "Noah, you arrogant little grifter!" the recorded voice snarled. "Do not think you won just because you and your ungrateful wife ran away from the restaurant last night. You think you are so safe hiding behind your fake little landscaping business. You think you can just steal my daughter's trust fund and ruin my son without facing any consequences. Well, you are in for a massive surprise tonight. I know exactly where you are going to be. I am going to walk right up to that stage, and I am going to rip the mask off your face in front of the mayor, the city council, and every single one of your wealthy clients. By the time I am finished telling them how you manipulated my mentally unstable daughter, you will be totally ruined. I am going to enjoy watching you lose everything. You better be ready because I am bringing the storm." The audio ended with a sharp click, leaving an oppressive, deafening silence in its wake. I pulled the phone away from the microphone and slipped it casually back into my clutch. I looked at Brenda. The color had completely drained from her face. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The recording was absolute, undeniable proof of premeditated defamation. It completely destroyed her facade of the concerned, weeping mother. She had just broadcasted her own malice, her vindictiveness, and her intent to cause a public disturbance to the most powerful people in the city. The mayor, sitting at a table near the front, shook his head in absolute disgust. Several corporate investors who had previously done business with Trent were already pulling out their phones, typing furious emails to their legal teams to sever all ties. The public dismantling was absolute. They had walked into this room hoping to destroy us, but they had only succeeded in broadcasting their own spectacular ruin. Special Agent Reynolds did not wait for the silence to break. He walked down the center aisle, his boots padding softly against the thick carpet. The crowd parted for him instinctively. Trent watched the federal agents approach and let out a whimper. He looked wildly around the room, searching for an escape route that did not exist. Every exit was blocked by a man in a windbreaker. Zoe had remained frozen near the back of the room during Brenda's disastrous monologue on the stage. Hearing the undeniable proof of their premeditated malice and seeing the federal agents moving in to make an arrest finally shattered her composure. She realized with terrifying clarity that standing next to Trent in this ballroom was professional suicide. She turned to face Trent. Her eyes were blazing with a fury that made Brenda's earlier tantrum look like child's play. "You absolute pathetic loser!" Zoe hissed, her voice vibrating with a rage so intense it carried across the quiet ballroom. Trent flinched, raising his hands defensively as if she were about to strike him. "Zoe, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Do not do this here. We can talk about this at home. Please just wait until we are outside." "There is no home, Trent," Zoe screamed, abandoning any attempt to maintain her dignity in front of the crowd. The bank is going to foreclose on the house because you have not paid the mortgage in 4 months. You lied to me every day. You told me the venture checks were delayed by banking regulations. You are just a parasite feeding off your family. Brenda, who was still standing on the stage clutching the microphone, tried to intervene. Zoe, stop it! She pleaded, her voice trembling. You are making it worse. You are embarrassing him in front of the mayor. Zoe whipped her head around to glare at the stage. I do not care about the mayor, Brenda, she yelled. I care about the fact that my husband committed federal wire fraud and dragged my name into his mess. You raised a criminal, Brenda. You raised a coward who steals his sister's identity because he is too lazy to get a job. Trent reached out, trying to grab Zoe's arm. Zoe, please, you are my wife. You have to stand by me. Do not ever touch me again. She snarled violently, jerking her arm away. She reached down to her left hand. With an aggressive motion, she yanked the massive diamond engagement ring and the matching wedding band off her finger. The diamond caught the light of the chandeliers for a brief second. You bought this ring with money you borrowed from my father, she revealed, her voice echoing with disgust. You are a disgusting, pathological liar. You gambled away our daughter's college fund on offshore sports betting sites. And you tried to steal $250,000 from the only person in this family who actually works for a living. With a sharp flick of her wrist, Zoe threw the heavy rings directly at Trent's chest. The platinum bands hit his lapel with a sharp thud and bounced off, clattering loudly against the polished marble floor. The sound of the jewelry hitting the stone echoed like a judge striking a gavel. I am filing for divorce the second the courthouse opens tomorrow morning, Zoe declared, her voice echoing with absolute finality. I am taking full custody of our daughter. My lawyers will strip you of any remaining parental rights because you are a documented flight risk and a federal criminal. Do not ever call me again. You are completely dead to me. She turned her back on him completely. She marched straight toward the main entrance, holding her head high. As she approached the federal agents, she stopped and looked directly at Special Agent Reynolds. I am an attorney, and I know my rights, Zoe told him, her voice completely steady. I had absolutely zero knowledge of the wire fraud or the identity theft. I am fully willing to cooperate with the federal investigation and surrender any physical property purchased with the stolen funds. But I am leaving this venue right now. Special Agent Reynolds looked at her briefly, analyzing her posture and her statement. He gave a short nod and stepped slightly to the side, allowing her enough space to pass. Thank you for your cooperation, ma'am, he said simply. My office will contact you tomorrow. Zoe walked through the oak doors, disappearing into the corridor without a backward glance. Trent was left standing completely alone in the center of the aisle, isolated, abandoned, and surrounded by the unforgiving stares of the most powerful people in the city. The illusion he had spent his adult life building was officially reduced to ash. Trent watched Zoe disappear through the heavy oak doors, his last remaining anchor to his fabricated life vanishing with her. The ballroom, previously buzzing with shock and outrage, had fallen into an expectant hush. Every eye was locked on the scene unfolding in the center aisle. Special Agent Reynolds motioned to the event security team, a silent command that broke the stillness. Two large guards stepped forward, flanked by the federal agents. Trenton Vance, Agent Reynolds said, his voice carrying the calm, absolute authority of federal law enforcement. You are under arrest for suspicion of federal wire fraud, identity theft, and crossing state lines to commit financial crimes. Place your hands behind your back. Trent didn't resist. The fight had completely drained out of him. He looked like a deflated balloon as the federal agent turned him around and secured his wrists with steel handcuffs. The sharp click of the metal echoed in the quiet room. He kept his head down, refusing to look at the mayor, the city council, or the investors who had just yesterday considered him a rising star. The reality of his situation had finally crashed through his delusions. He was going to federal prison. Brenda, however, was not going down quietly. As two security guards approached the stage to escort her down, she snapped out of her paralyzed state. The absolute terror of the situation ignited a final desperate burst of manic energy. "Don't you dare touch me!" she shrieked, backing away from the guards until she bumped against the crystal podium. She pointed a shaking finger at Noah and me. "They planned this. This is a setup. You can't arrest my son. I demand to speak to the mayor. I demand to speak to Richard." "Ma'am, please step down from the stage," one of the guards said firmly, his hand extended. "If you do not cooperate, we will have to remove you by force." "I am not a criminal," Brenda screamed, her voice cracking, her face streaked with ruined makeup. She looked out at the audience, her eyes wild, searching for a single sympathetic face among the elite crowd. "I am a mother trying to protect her family. You are all being fooled by a glorified lawnmower." No one moved to help her. The investors, many of whom Trent had relentlessly pitched his non-existent startup to, were already taking action. All around the room, the soft glow of smartphone screens illuminated the faces of the city's financial elite. They were furiously texting their legal teams and portfolio managers. The messages were swift and brutal: sever all ties, cancel all pending term sheets, blacklist Trenton Vance and his holding companies immediately. The venture capital well had just dried up completely and publicly. Seeing the complete lack of support, Brenda let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. She lunged forward, not toward the guards, but toward me. She raised her hand, her acrylic nails aimed at my face. Noah moved with blinding speed. He didn't strike her, but he stepped firmly between us, catching her wrist in a vice-like grip before she could even come close. He looked down at her, his expression hard as stone. "You are done here, Brenda," Noah said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Your audience is gone, your money is gone, and your control over Madeline is permanently gone. If you ever try to contact my wife again, I will personally make sure you share a cell block with your son." He released her wrist, giving her a slight push toward the waiting guards. The fight finally left her. She stumbled, her shoulders slumping. The security guards grabbed her by both arms, escorting her roughly down the carpeted stairs. Agent Reynolds read Trent his Miranda rights as they marched him toward the exit. Brenda followed closely behind, flanked by security, her head hanging low, weeping genuine tears of absolute humiliation. The procession moved down the center aisle, passing tables filled with people who were actively watching their downfall. The walk of shame felt like it took hours, an excruciating public display of their complete and utter failure. As they reached the heavy oak doors, Brenda stopped, struggling. She looked back over her shoulder, her eyes locking onto mine one last time. There was no defiance left, only a hollow, terrified realization that she had destroyed her own life. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I just watched her disappear into the corridor flanked by federal agents. The heavy doors swung shut behind them, sealing them out of my life forever. The room let out a collective breath, the tension breaking instantly. Noah turned to me, offering his arm. "Shall we finish this speech?" he asked softly. I took his arm, the weight of the last 3 years finally lifting off my shoulders. 2 weeks later, that profound relief solidified into permanent legal reality. I sat in a high-rise boardroom in downtown Boston, overlooking the bustling harbor. This was not the dingy wood-paneled office of my mother's disgraced attorney, Richard. This was the pristine corporate headquarters of the primary wealth management firm that oversaw my grandfather's entire estate. Richard, by the way, was currently facing a severe disciplinary review by the State Bar Association for attempting to facilitate financial extortion using a revoked proxy document. He was going to lose his license and his practice entirely. But my focus today was strictly on the future. Across the polished mahogany tables sat 3 senior trust administrators. They slid a thick stack of finalized legal documents toward me. The paperwork was incredibly complex, but the conclusion was beautifully simple. By serving me with a formal legal demand to restructure the trust, Brenda and Trent had officially triggered the in terrorem poison pill clause my grandfather had meticulously woven into the charter. They had legally challenged the integrity of the trust in writing. Therefore, their respective shares were immediately and irrevocably forfeited. The senior partner handed me a heavy gold pen. I signed my name on the final dotted line, pressing the ink firmly into the thick paper. With that single signature, I became the sole beneficiary of the entire $5 million estate. The money was immediately transferred into a secure, heavily encrypted, diversified portfolio managed by my own financial team. My mother and brother had spent years trying to steal my portion through manipulation and fraud, but their unbridled greed had ultimately handed me everything. Their reality over the past 14 days had been a steep, terrifying freefall. Trent never made it home after the gala. He was currently sitting in a federal detention center awaiting trial. Special Agent Reynolds had called me earlier in the week with a very satisfying update. The federal prosecutor had formally indicted Trent on multiple felony counts, including wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and bank fraud. Because he was deemed a severe flight risk due to the international plane tickets he tried to purchase on the day of his arrest, the federal judge swiftly denied him bail. He was trapped in a concrete cell, wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, completely stripped of his designer blazers and his false bravado. Zoe had kept her promise. She filed for divorce the very next morning, serving Trent the papers directly in federal lockup. She secured sole legal and physical custody of their young daughter. She also handed over all of Trent's digital devices, offshore betting logins, and financial records to the federal investigators, completely cooperating with the prosecution to secure her own immunity. Trent was looking at a mandatory minimum of 10 to 15 years in federal prison. There was no tech startup venture. There was no billionaire future. There was only the harsh fluorescent lighting of a federal penitentiary. Brenda was facing her own personal apocalypse. The suspicious activity reports I filed had kept her joint bank accounts frozen just long enough for her entire financial house of cards to collapse. Without access to her pension or the money she funneled from Trent's illicit activities, she defaulted on absolutely everything. It turned out she had secretly taken out a massive second mortgage on her pristine suburban colonial home to cover another one of Trent's earlier gambling margins. When she missed the final grace period payment, the bank moved with ruthless efficiency. Foreclosure proceedings were initiated almost immediately. The illusion of her high society life was completely shattered. The same wealthy friends she used to gossip with at the country club completely abandoned her after witnessing her unhinged meltdown at the landscape architecture gala. No one wanted to be associated with a woman who actively helped her son commit federal identity theft against her own daughter. Her social circle vanished overnight, leaving her entirely ostracized. According to a brief email I received from a distant aunt, Brenda was currently packing her belongings into cheap cardboard boxes. The bank had given her 30 days to vacate the property. She had no trust fund, no savings, and no golden child to protect her anymore. She was moving into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the outskirts of the city. She was left with absolutely nothing but the bitter consequences of her own actions and the crushing weight of her massive debt. I slid the signed trust documents back across the mahogany table. The senior partner smiled and offered his hand. "Congratulations, Madeline," he said warmly. "Your grandfather would be incredibly proud of how you handled this situation." I shook his hand, feeling a deep, profound sense of closure. I stood up and walked out of the glass boardroom, stepping into the bright afternoon sun. Noah was waiting for me by the curb, leaning against his car with a proud, easy smile. I walked toward him, ready to finally begin our lives completely free from the shadows of my past. Noah opened the passenger door for me, and I slid into the leather seat. We did not drive back to our house in the suburbs. Instead, we headed straight for the heart of the downtown waterfront district. Noah had wanted to show me the final stages of his firm's crown jewel project. It was the massive municipal contract Brenda had so foolishly mocked during her pathetic attempt at blackmail. The building was a staggering testament to sustainable urban design, rising 30 stories above the harbor. It was constructed of reflective solar glass and cascading living walls of vibrant green foliage that naturally filtered the city air. We rode the glass elevator all the way up to the rooftop terrace. When the steel doors glided open, the ambient noise of the busy city streets faded into a gentle, distant hum. The roof was an expansive architectural oasis. Lush native grasses swayed gently in the coastal breeze surrounding sleek modern seating areas carved from reclaimed timber. A sleek water feature recycled rainwater through a gravity filtration system, creating a soothing rhythmic background sound. The panoramic view of the Boston skyline bathed in the warm golden light of the late afternoon sun was absolutely breathtaking. This was Noah's vision brought to life. He was not a fraud. He was a master of his craft, who built beautiful, enduring things while my family had only ever known how to destroy. Noah squeezed my hand and smiled. "I am going to grab us a bottle of sparkling water from the pavilion fridge," he said, his voice relaxed and happy. "Go take a seat and enjoy the view, Madeline. You earned this." I walked over to a comfortable lounge chair positioned perfectly to watch the sunset over the harbor. I sat down, letting the soft breeze brush against my face. Out of sheer habit, I reached into my purse and pulled out my smartphone to check for any urgent alerts from my cybersecurity team. My main inbox was completely clear. But when I swiped over to my secure call log, a small red notification badge caught my eye. It was resting over the blocked contacts folder. I tapped the icon. The screen populated with a staggering wall of notifications. There were 47 missed calls and 22 unlistened voicemails, all originating from the same cheap prepaid burner phone number. It was Brenda. Even though her primary number was permanently blocked, she was clearly spending her dwindling cash buying cheap disposable phones just to try and reach me. I stared at the list of voicemails. The timestamps told a pathetic story of escalating desperation. The first few were left late at night, probably after she realized her house was actually going into foreclosure. The most recent ones were logged just hours ago, likely right after she received the formal legal notice that the trust fund was permanently gone. I sat there in the peaceful quiet of the rooftop garden, holding the device in my hand. 3 years ago, the sight of those voicemails would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety and guilt. I would have agonized over what she was saying. I would have wondered if she was finally ready to apologize, or if she was sick, or if she genuinely needed my help. But today, I felt absolutely nothing. I knew exactly what those audio files contained. There would be no genuine remorse. There would be no accountability for trying to ruin my husband or for helping Trent commit federal wire fraud. Brenda was completely incapable of self-reflection. The voicemails would just be a toxic cocktail of weeping manipulation, shifting blame, and desperate demands for financial rescue. She was not begging for her daughter back. She was begging for her bank account back. I did not tap play on a single one. I tapped the edit button in the top right corner of the screen. I selected the option to highlight all messages. The entire column of desperate voicemails turned blue. Without a single ounce of hesitation or regret, I pressed the delete button. A prompt appeared asking if I was sure I wanted to permanently erase the files. I hit confirm. The screen went completely blank. The digital trash bin emptied, wiping her frantic voice from my existence forever. The action was remarkably simple, but the emotional release was monumental. I locked my phone and dropped it back into my purse. The heavy, suffocating chain that had tied me to their endless drama was finally permanently severed. I looked out at the horizon, watching the sky shift into brilliant shades of orange and violet. For my entire life, society had tried to tell me that family was an unbreakable bond, defined entirely by blood and DNA. But sitting here now, I knew that was a lie. Blood only dictated biological origin. True family was defined by mutual respect. It was built on trust, honesty, and the desire to see each other thrive. Family did not steal your identity, or pawn your heirlooms, or try to publicly humiliate you. Noah walked back across the wooden decking, holding two cold glass bottles. He handed one to me and sat down close by my side. He did not ask what I was looking at on my phone. He just understood. He reached out and wrapped his large, warm hand securely around mine. I leaned my head against his shoulder, letting out a long, peaceful exhale. The city below us began to light up as the evening approached, but up here everything was quiet and perfectly safe. I closed my eyes, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I was finally completely free.